And we are live. Awesome. Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm here with Sophia. Hi, Sophia. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Hi, Neha. Good afternoon.
It's great to be here with you, and thank you for taking the time out to hang out with me and to answer some of the questions that I have
Thank
about
you.
about leadership. So, Sophia has several years of experience coaching leaders. Uh, Zofia, can you just talk a little bit about what you've been doing in this space?
Well, I myself would consider myself a leader, and I worked in corporate HR for 12, 13 years before I became or started coaching 17 years ago. And initially as an internal coach, and did some further training, and then ventured out and became part of a startup in Hungary, and then most recently while living in Australia I started working virtually as a leadership coach 5 years ago, so even before the pandemic. And I meet leaders who work in organizations at big and small, and working across various time zones and geographies and languages and cultures. So it's quite fascinating to notice some trends that it like time management or priorities, or and I guess most of us can relate that how pandemic has changed how we work, and meeting leaders, family members, children, pets, spouses. So it is quite insightful um, experiment or experience in the past year, two. I think the last year especially seem to have been become more and more busy. Organizations seem to invest more and more into virtual coaching, and not coaching, not just offering coaching, not just to senior leaders, but also individual contributors, new managers, and for transitioning leaders as well.
Hmm. That's beautiful. That's so in alignment with, Kocharya's mission, which is to democratize coaching, like getting coaching into all the different levels of society, not just in organizations, but certainly in organizations as well. We can see it play out. So you mentioned that you have you've noticed a lot of different trends.
Mm.
It sounds like your you've got your finger on the pulse. You know what I mean? Like in a lot of different cultures across so many different cultures and time zones and countries and so on. What are some of the common trends that you've noticed? You mentioned time management. You mentioned working in a pandemic. Like what are like some of the things that are really coming up for people? Can you get a little granular about it?
I think that it's interesting you ask this. I think definitely the trust, like working now remotely, that trusting their team members and trust overall. And I think the other thing what I really noticed and was quite interesting is that leaders realizing they can't do everything. So I guess using a coaching approach or using coaching in their as a tool in their leadership toolbox. So moving away from being very prescriptive, micromanaging to that empowerment, and just even having a coach like conversation. They don't have to have a full on coaching session like you and I would be doing. It's just knowing what could be some questions, or when to ask more open-ended questions and more curious questions. And I think this is something I also notice, or I have leaders who specifically ask that how can I become a coach? Where what are the training that's available? That that's not definite, not necessarily 150 hours, but as a starter, 20, 30, 40 hours to, or even less maybe. So that's what one trend, the trust, the coaching, and I guess the work life balance, the well being, that they don't want to be burned out. Some already had that experience and definitely not want to be there again. And I think also working with their team members, so they have a better appreciation of their own boundaries and needs. So yeah, those seem to be what I'm noticing among others. Of course, I could go on and on. uh, there is way too much to mention, but definitely these stand out.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like you've brought up some of the really big key issues that are recurring in a lot of companies, a lot of organizations. Even in my peer group, I notice people talking about this so much more often about what it's like to work remotely, work in a team remotely, be managed remotely, giving feedback remotely, doing all these things.
Yeah.
So the first thing you mentioned was trust, and I would love to start there. Like, what do you think are some of the things that some of the key things you've discovered in the process of building trust? Like, first, how do you identify that there isn't enough trust here, or that it can be worked on? I suppose it can always be worked on, right? There's always room to make a relationship stronger. But what is it about trust that is so important, and how do we establish it over Zoom?
Mm, mm. It's a good question. Yeah, thank you for asking that. So, how do you establish that? And I guess over Zoom especially, and I think continue doing that. And I do hear that a lot. But now, how do I do that over Zoom? I'm used to doing it face to face or sitting next to one another. Now, how do I translate that? Um, that I'm not seeing people. So this is I hear that quite a lot. Um, I guess it's all I'm asking open-ended questions and exploring with the leaders what specifically it is for them, that how they can all do it the way that feels sort of authentic or feels comfortable for them. So it's very different for me as a coach doing that because like my engagements are like once every 2 weeks or once a month. So it's um, I use camera all the time, so I really was quite surprised that some organizations not necessarily use that, and I guess it does create a much more, not just voice. I guess the overcoming the assumptions or biases that somebody might be multitasking or reading an email or responding to an email while there is a meeting going on. So definitely face to face. I guess very basic, smile if you can, um,
Mm,
and be show empathy, and
yeah.
I guess manage the expectations. That maybe it is not realistic to have the expectations there were there before. It is just a conversation. Again, like more like a coach-like conversation. That what's a realistic expectations, and I know also organizations do have, the bottom line and KPIs to work towards too. So it is, I'm not offering any advice to my clients. It is more their way and finding out what is possible in their relationships with their team members.
Yeah. Sure, and I'm sure that it varies from situation to situation. What about the manager themselves taking that initiative to improve trust? Are you seeing that people are doing that, or is it something they need to understand that, hey, this is important to do in your relationship with your employer, with your team member, or with your colleague?
I would say it it is 50-50 that it is an insight, and also they come in with wanting to work on trust. So yeah, I don't know. Did I respond to your question?
Yeah, yeah, you did answer the question, definitely. I think I'm just remembering this study that I read quite a while back that because you mentioned the cameras being off. One of the things that that study found was that people are just a lot more likely to lie. They had these different situations. One is you're talking in person, the other is you're writing emails, or you're texting each other, or you're on the phone talking to someone.
Yeah.
And guess which one would be the least trustworthy out of all of these situations? And it turns out that just being on the phone is the least trustworthy. People are a lot more likely to lie, and it
Yeah.
makes so much sense. I see you nodding along. It makes so much sense that people would, uh, you're not seeing each other, you're not reading each other's cues, there's nothing on paper, so I think just even this basic 101 of like turn your cameras on, just be there, talk human to human, like connect on a deeper level. It's such a basic thing, but it's so deeply neglected by so
Yeah.
many different organizations and relationships.
But you see now, I also work with the humanitarian sector, which they are in very hard duty stations where the internet might not be as it is in any first world country.
Mm.
So I guess you have to put that into context and really, again, I guess manage my own judgments and I guess be
Yeah.
curious of what's happening and um, what's getting in the way to using the camera, and then maybe just even maybe having the camera on for 5 minutes, so at least you see each other and know put the face to the name, um, and then maybe just say bye or say good, hi, welcome, and then goodbye with the cameras on, and then in between, of course, if the bandwidth is an issue, and I'm sure we all experience, it's dropping off, it's not, uh, the bandwidth doesn't always work. So I guess just be really mindful about that and manage our own judgments and biases.
Excellent point. Thank you for that. I think I needed to manage my own judgment. That probably came across a little judgmental. I think you're right. I think it's very quick to judge. It's very easy for us to judge and say, "Oh, this is just the basic stuff. Why aren't people doing that?" But of course, we have to look at the circumstances as well. But I think also in a lot of organizations, it's just not
Yeah,
something people think about. It's just not even given any thought. So I think it's important that we highlight the importance of it. It's just a small
yeah,
thing, big results, right? Small,
exactly.
big results. Yeah. Great. Another thing you mentioned is time management, and really what's come up for me personally a lot, and I'm just gonna be really selfish and ask you all
Mhm.
the questions that serve me, is that I think oftentimes it's not really about time management. It's about emotional management for me,
Mm,
because and again, also just in my peer group, in the people that I talk to about their work, and how it is for them to be in this state now, to be in this new normal, and all that stuff that people say, um, that you could be having a really frustrating moment. Say I have a friend who has children. I don't, but I have a friend who has children, and two little boys, and they could be wreaking havoc in the house, and there's a lot of attention there. There's like
yeah.
some action that needs to be taken, and then immediately she has to go into a meeting and manage people or talk to people, um, or get feedback from her boss and things like that, have a difficult conversation there, or just be present and engaged there. It's such a challenge to move from things like that and then to come here. We don't have a workspace that we're going into, that
Mm.
just leave everything behind. It's a change of scene. It's all that kind of stuff. It's a lot harder to switch off, or to switch gears, maybe I should
Yeah.
say. um are you finding that to be quite a common problem as well? And how are we addressing this, as
A really great question. And again, there is no one solution that fits all. It is a very individual. And again, like probably in the very beginning of the pandemic, I had a group coaching session within an organization, and those employees said that, oh, we are meeting at 11 o'clock, or my boss messages me on Teams at midnight, and I was like, inside, I was outraged. But I guess that was the very beginning of the pandemic when people really had to adjust. And I think what I'm noticing is that probably leaders or my clients seem to be really becoming better at it, like setting better boundaries. But of course, I also work with a leader in Asia Pacific, and his organization is in the middle of America, so the time difference is 12 hours. So it's either 7 o'clock, 7 p.m., or 8 p.m. Like I guess anything beyond 7 p.m. it's like normal, because this is when his team or his leader in America wakes up and starts his day. So then it is very difficult to sort of give any advice, and this is why it is whatever it works. And I guess just some most of the time creating awareness. And I think I also noticed, but I'm sure many of you heard this, that maybe having 2 or 3 meetings at the same time, and then which do you go to, or how do you prioritize um, those meetings? And like I came across very sort of useful tips or articles early on, when on LinkedIn, when leaders posted that try to have, I guess, 20-minute meetings or 50-minute meetings, so you don't end up back to back. Or I also worked with a leader who had to come back from Asia to Australia, and the hours was only the difference was only 3 hours, but still, I guess, her getting up 8 o'clock in the morning, starting her day, finishing very late. So actually, it was her strategy to go for a run in the middle of the day, or find ways to switch off, so when in the afternoon she can still be at her top, or top of the game, and participate in meetings and do meaningful work. So, and she did sort of enlist her team members and her manager, that this is what she was thinking, and to get the support from them, so she can make it work. So I think some of these things do stand out after a year, and this happened early on in the pandemic. So there are ways we can all find, that's working for us, and that's unique to us. And yeah.
That's a great reminder, because certainly this happens to me. I get stuck in a loop of, oh my gosh, this is so frustrating. This is happening. Why is this happening? This will never end, all these things. But the reality is that we all adapt, and we all move on, and we all grow, and we all evolve to the situation. It's not necessary that something is the way it is and it's always going to be
Yeah.
like that. I think it's really important to remember that, and I think I'll make a note of it as well at some point, and just stick it on my laptop that this is temporary. um, and
But I think
yeah.
you did ask another part, which probably I didn't respond to, was that I guess that what's happening in the background is probably what I would call, and maybe this is a like a coach language, like signposting to the people in the meeting, that I have 2 kids at home. I might have to, like, I guess part of me is listening to what's happening behind, and I know not everybody has a big enough house, or um, support around. Actually, I probably only had one leader I worked with who did say that she has an au pair. I had heard grandparents going from one side of the world to the other to be there and support. Sometimes it is possible, sometimes not, and it is not easy. And I've also had leaders who are working from their kitchen in the past year or two, and so I guess it's again so much diversity in terms of how people live, what's happening, what's working, what do they have to work around. And I guess what you said, that managing our own sort of emotions, I'm like, I guess mindfulness could be something, or exercising, or something that sort of is gets you away from the computer for whatever number of minutes or hours during the day, or breaks up your day to some extent. And I've somebody told me that, oh, it's even just squatting in while the kettle is boiling and waiting for the tea to be ready, it's also a good way to, I guess, get some energy and get away from the computer.
That's a great point. I think we all need to also just be a little more mindful of getting away from the. I think there are people who are, and we have so many ways as well. There are all these apps. There's
Yeah.
watches and smart watches and stuff that tell you you've been sitting for an hour, get up and move around. You like, all these things are there. Tech is catching up. It's helping us too. But it's just up to us to leverage that. Yeah, but yeah, I think just coming back to the emotional aspect of things, I think that's where. I see a lot of people struggling in terms of, you could be having a complete breakdown about something, and then having to just like wipe your tears and sit in front of a computer and attend a meeting, and I think that's where like leaders and managers need to just be even more available and present, perhaps for their employees and for their team members, and perhaps vice versa too, because managers are human too. They also have their own things going on. So how can we communicate better with each other? You mentioned signposting. How can we communicate better to each other that this is the space I'm in, instead of um, the reaction often is like, I'm anxious about something, I'm frustrated about something, I'll take it out on other people. Like, we
Mm.
all have a proclivity for reaction. How do we say I have reacted, how do I fix it? Or say I feel like I'm in a worked up state, how do I approach a meeting in that situation?
I guess again, there is so many different solutions in a way that
Sure.
leaders come up with and create their own strategies and coping mechanisms. Definitely, what I notice is being more vulnerable, and I guess that seemed to have contributed to because we are working from home. So, like we let people into our space differently than we did previously. Like, we went to work and it was our work, and then now we are in our living room, in our bedroom, in whatever space in the house, with, as I did say, spouse, kids, dogs, cats, anything. So the spectrum is so wide what can happen. And I guess everybody, I'm sure, has experienced more uncomfortable situations these days, and we just probably, myself included, getting more sort of used to it. That yes, it does happen that my kids forgot the key, and I have to, you know, stand up in the middle of the session and say, "Sorry, I have to let my kids in," or there is a delivery, or the pet getting sick, or kids becoming sick or hurting themselves. So it is more, I guess, normalize. It is normal. It is human to have this side of ourselves that everybody will see it, um, which they haven't seen before. And I think how do can people be more ready to show up is probably be more self-compassionate, or show empathy to others and themselves as well, or um, learn about letting go of being perfect. And I guess good enough is good enough. And yeah, uh, today it's probably not best, and tomorrow it's going to be a different day, and maybe hopefully it's going to be better. And setting intentions, I guess it's good work as well.
Setting intentions, that's really that feels important.
Mm.
So say, uh, what are some frameworks, again, like I'm sure there are different answers for everybody, but like what are some frameworks, or what are some ways that I can start thinking about, like what are my intentions with this particular meeting, or what are my intentions with this particular call that I'm going to go on?
I guess thinking about the purpose, what would success look like? How would you like to feel
Mm,
when you finish the meeting? So then, what is the mindset you have to go and have now to be have that outcome? So I guess in a way, self-coaching a bit, or could be a technique to use that I can think of. So can you think of an image or a metaphor? I do work with leaders, in identifying these images or metaphors they want to be as leaders, or that would represent their best quality as leaders that they can bring, and how can they sort of, the way I call it, I'm not sure whether that's really accurate, but like how can you anchor yourself in that, and
mm,
use that as an anchor when things might not go as planned. And I guess overall being curious, because if you're, as you know, like if you're curious in the moment, it can create much more positive outcomes rather than let your emotions hijack.
yeah, yeah, I love that. That's a great point. um yeah. So when we talk about this is something I want to circle back to that we discussed earlier, which is having meetings at random times and things like that. This is something that even within Kocharya, like Magda is on the other side of the planet. I'm here in India, and our meetings often have to be like quite late in the night for me and early in the morning for her. So like it's just not an ideal situation. It's just it can get it can get challenging, to be
Mm.
there, to be present at that hour. You've had a whole work day behind you, and then you're going into a meeting, you're trying to brainstorm ideas, you're trying to strategize things. But sometimes it might happen that she's just waking up, or if we flip it the other way around, it's the evening for her and morning for me. I'm just waking up, I haven't barely had my coffee, and we're trying to get the ball rolling. I think in those cases, it can get a little bit of it can become a bit of a challenge. But I think we've navigated our way through it in a certain way. But there is one thing that I've started to feel more strongly about, especially with with my team and managing my team, or even with people. I think we all have this thing that let's not have meetings for meetings' sake,
Mhm.
but but I also feel that there is something to be said about having a consistent standing meeting, say once a week or twice a
Mhm.
week, checking in with your people, checking in with the person you're reporting to, or the ones who
Mhm.
are reporting to you, like checking in with them, getting a pulse on what's going on with them, and talking about things which are not related to work.
Yeah, definitely connecting as a human rather than as a colleague and work related stuff. It's more like what's happening in your world, successes, challenges, um, kids. Again, like just overall what's happening for everybody. And I like that you said that just connecting more as a person rather than work. And I also experienced meetings when it's just what's your one word that you come to the meeting, and like how do you sort of checking in, so then you are actually by naming it, you sort of put it aside or not dwell on it. um,
Mm, yeah. I think it also goes a long way towards, like that emotional management piece that we talked
yeah.
about, and also building trust, building a relationship with that person, um, actually knowing that somebody cares for us, is there to support us, and is looking out for us, or is interested in us, even,
Mm,
is interested in knowing beyond, what I can give them, what I can produce for them, what KPIs I can achieve for them. Um, I think that also feels really important, and especially in this day and age, especially in the Zoom era of work.
yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, great. Sophia, I have nothing further to add, but is there something that you would like to say to people who are leaders and are looking to build trust, looking to feel more connected to their team members, and looking to get better outcomes and achieve a vision as a team together
Mm.
in an organization? What would you like to say to them?
Be curious and let go of your assumptions and ask open-ended questions to, I guess, bring out what's in your team or team members, rather than assume and make up a story in your head.
Awesome. I love that. That is fantastic. Making the stories in our head, going in with an agenda, going in with the thing. But yeah, just being curious, asking open-ended questions, connecting on a deeper level. That's a beautiful note to wrap up this session. Thank you so much for joining us, Sophia, and thank you everyone for watching.
Thanks, Thea. Thanks for your time today.
All right.